Hello, Deputy Mayor. Greetings.
Hello, Council President.
Sherry said she's got half an eye on the U.S. House of Representatives, and I was reminding us that last week we had a council meeting like charge forth.
2021. Welcome.
I think on item 18, staff report from administration, if it's all right with you, Deputy Mayor and Director Cervantes, I'm going to have Deputy Chief Stacy Murphy go first. I think that her item will be quick.
Sure.
I think. Yeah. And then also, just so you know, we are removing or pulling item 15, which is exploration of reparations from the consent agenda. So there'll be a few comments on that item before we go to the discussion item. So you have a few minutes.
Great.
Yep. Well, it should be a good discussion.
Yeah. So I'm going to go off camera, but I'm here.
Okay, great. I'm going to do some pinning and then we'll be ready to go. And for folks just tuning in, we just finished HRA a second ago, so I'm just giving my colleagues a second to stretch their legs, grab their water, get back on to the next meeting. And we should all be here in just a moment.
And I do want to be sure that we've connected with Traren Cruz and Georgia Fort.
Mr. Cruz is on the call.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Trey, will we have Georgia as well?
I believe she's joining us. I'll check in with her real quick.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Cruz, if she doesn't make it on in time, you might have to just improvise. Sometimes things go quick here.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
2, 3, 4. All right. Okay, Sherry, are you ready?
I'm going to start recording and then I'm ready. Yes.
All right. All right. It looks like we are all in the house, so I will call the St. Paul City Council to order. Roll call.
Jalali.
Here.
Nager.
Here.
Prince.
Here.
Tao.
Here.
Tolbert.
Here.
Yang.
Here.
Council President Brenmoen.
Here.
7 present, no one absent.
Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda items 2 through 17 are before you for your consideration.
All right. Item number 5 is being withdrawn. I think that will come back when a few more details are worked out. And we are pulling 15 for separate consideration. Is there anything else that should be considered separately today from consent? All right. Seeing none, Ms. Yang moves the consent agenda. Roll call.
Jalali.
Aye.
Naker.
Aye.
Prince.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Tolbert.
Yes.
Yang.
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The consent agenda is adopted as amended. Item 15, Resolution 21-77, committing to racial healing through the exploration of reparations for American descendants of chattel slavery living in St. Paul.
This item has, as I often point out, has 7 authors, so a fairly good chance of passing here today. But I'm going to turn things over to Ms. Prince, who really led this initiative from the get-go and has guests here to speak today. So Ms. Prince, let's turn it over to you.
Thank you, Council President Brennan. I don't need to tell anyone here that it is nearly 8 months since the tragic killing of George Floyd that made the Twin Cities the epicenter of an international demand for racial justice. Within the week, we'll be honoring Dr. Martin Luther King on the national holiday of his birthday, and it is our aim today to make a fresh start in this new year. At the request of and with gratitude for the St. Paul Recovery Act and Reparations Committee, Steering Committee, this council is taking a bold step to make clear that with regard to racial injustice, we cannot and will not go back. On behalf of the Steering Committee, I would like to introduce members of the committee to speak to us. First, co-chair Traren Cruz. Traren is a national expert on the issue of reparations and a passionate leader of this movement at the national, state, and local levels. Georgia Fort, his co-chair, is a journalist, a well-known former anchor and reporter with network affiliates. Through her Fort Report, as an independent journalist locally, Ms. Fort is doing some of the most extensive and important reporting on local issues, most recently covering the relocations of the homeless encampments in St. Paul. Mr. Cruz and Ms. Fort, take it away.
Welcome, Mr. Cruz, and just make sure you unmute yourself before you start speaking. It's wonderful to have you here.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Fort, would you like to go first?
Oh, you can go ahead.
Okay. I just have a statement to read real quick. Foundational Black American Dred Scott and his wife Harriet were held in military slavery at Fort Snelling from 1836 to 1838. The Northwest Ordinance 1787 and the Missouri Compromise of 1820 prohibited slavery in the area, but slavery existed there. Even so, due to the Dred Scott decision, slavery was legal in Minnesota, in the Minnesota Territory for 14 months. St. Paul is home to the Rondo neighborhood, which was a thriving Black community, which had Black businesses and homeowners, which was wiped out due to the construction of the 94 freeway. A 2008 Ramsey County anti-racism audit found that its policies and procedures hurt the people that society fears the most, and those people are the American descendants of chattel slavery. A couple years ago, a documentary came out called The Jim Crow of the North, and it documented racial covenants, and racial covenants are mortgages or deeds that say that certain houses in St. Paul and Minneapolis cannot be sold to Black people. This hurt generational wealth building for Black Americans in the city of St. Paul. Also, we want to address mass incarceration, and the Great Recession also helped Black wealth building in the city of St. Paul. Despite these barriers, foundational Black Americans who reside in St. Paul still produce the likes of Dave Winfield, Stacey Robinson, and other Black professional athletes. Our first Black mayor, Melvin Carter, and other powerful Black elected officials such as Debbie Montgomery, Nathaniel Khalid, John Thompson, Janelle Foster, Chantel Allen, Zuki Williams, and Rena Moran. Despite their many contributions, however, whites still have 90% of the wealth and Blacks only have 2.6% of the wealth in America. COVID-19 has exposed why we need reparations for the American descendants of chattel slavery, and George Floyd really emphasized that. We started this work about a year ago. I spoke at an MN by MN conference workshop. Ms. Prince attended the workshop. I met with her a couple months later to talk to her about the St. Paul Recovery Act. And then that's when we started the book club and started doing the work of reaching out to community members and educating the public about the need for reparations in the city of St. Paul. So we spoke with pretty much every Black business owner in St. Paul. We spoke with a lot of constituents in St. Paul. We held some rallies. One of my favorite parts was the reparations rally we held on Juneteenth. I think it was the first rally of that type that I've ever been to, and it was in solidarity with people around the country. And that was really exciting. And last night we had Chris Lehman, the author of Slavery's Reach, was on our book club meeting, and we started learning more about slavery in Minnesota, some of the investments that were made and things like that. So it's been a great journey to get to this point.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, I just think that this resolution is extremely important. I think it's a first step, a commitment to say we, the city of St. Paul, want to explore what reparations could look like for us. I also think that it's a first step and an invitation to invite more community members, more community leaders, more stakeholders to get involved with the process. And as a journalist, as Councilmember pointed out, another piece that I worked on was a documentary about Rondo specifically, which is now available on Amazon Prime. And Rondo Beyond the Pavement became extremely successful. It was screened in more than a dozen film festivals across the nation. And the reason why is because communities all across the country can relate to that story. There are communities all across the country that have a population of African Americans who were disproportionately impacted by the construction of interstates. And so we know that these things have transpired in our own community. And I think that now is a great time to start exploring ways to reconcile the wrongs that have been done to the descendants of slavery. And I think that right now the world is watching our community. The world is watching to see what are we going to do. And I think that this is a great time for all of us to be on the right side of history. I think that this is a great time to lead in providing bold solutions. And as we know, our community, our state is very unique in that it has dozens of Fortune 500 companies headquartered here. And so, all of them, I've done a lot of work with diversity, equity, inclusion as it pertains to workplaces in these corporations. And everybody is exploring equitable solutions, equitable outcomes. And the reality of it is we cannot show up at the table anywhere and talk about equity without economic justice. Because African Americans are continuously disproportionately impacted in every facet of life. There was a report that came out that said Minnesota is the 4th worst place for Black people to live. And it was so embarrassing and shameful to read that. But the reality of it is our white counterparts are performing above national standards in every facet of life: education, home ownership, wealth, you name it. And African Americans, the African American residents here in the city of St. Paul, are performing below the national average. And so I think that this is a first step to start exploring some tangible solutions. Obviously, it is not like we're saying here is the way, but we're saying let's make a first step in exploring what this could look like for our city.
Council President, I think you're on mute.
Ms. Ford, thank you so much for your comments. I am going to turn things back to Jane. Ms. Prince, for just a moment. I know that you wanted to read some of the resolution out loud for us.
Yeah, I think, the resolution, we're getting a lot of coverage on this, and I do want to read the important resolved clauses of this resolution. Again, it was developed by the steering committee, and it has been signed on to by this entire council, which is momentous. Here is what we're resolving by our actions today. Resolve that the City Council of St. Paul does herein apologize and commit to making amends for its participation in and sanctioning of institutional racism against the American descendants of chattel slavery. And be it further resolved that the City Council of St. Paul does herein apologize and commit to making amends for Dred Scott being held in bondage at Fort Snelling and the enforcement of institutional racism and its accompanying discriminatory practices. Be it further resolved that the City Council of St. Paul apologizes and commits to making amends for allowing the construction of Interstate 94 to destroy a vibrant and emerging middle-class Black residential and business community. And be it further resolved that the City Council of St. Paul calls on all organizations, corporations, and institutions in St. Paul that have advanced and benefited from racial inequity to join the city in these apologies, and invites them to address racism within their own structures and programs, and to work with the city to more comprehensively address systemic racism. Be it further resolved that the City Council of St. Paul calls on the state of Minnesota and our federal delegation to initiate policymaking and provide funding for reparations at the state and national level. And be it further resolved that the St. Paul City Council commits to use its authority to establish within the next 6 months a legislative advisory committee to create roles and responsibilities for a new city commission to be known as the St. Paul Recovery Act Community Reparations Commission. And be it further resolved that the St. Paul Recovery Act Community Reparations Commission shall be empowered to make short, medium, and long-term recommendations to specifically address the creation of generational wealth for American descendants of chattel slavery and to boost economic mobility and opportunity in the Black community. And be it further resolved that the St. Paul Recovery Act Community Reparations Commission, as envisioned, will make significant progress toward repairing the damage caused by public-private systemic racism in our city, and will issue a report for consideration by the city which will focus on, but not be limited to, strategies to grow equity and generational wealth, closing the gaps in home ownership, healthcare, education, employment, and pay, and fairness within criminal justice among the American descendants of chattel slavery. That is the resolution that we're passing today. And I'll wrap up my comments with, in a less familiar excerpt from his I Have a Dream speech delivered during the 1963 March on Washington, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Today, this council is acknowledging that debt and resolving to do something about it."
Thank you, Ms. Prince. I have a student in my office today that's also working, so I'm trying to make sure that I'm muted when I'm not speaking, and I apologize for that, but he's doing his work, so that's great. Ms. Prince, thank you for reading that, and as you were going through the resolution, something that people who don't hear our resolutions often may not notice that so much of what you read is in the be it resolved section as opposed to the whereas section. And, a lot of times we use our whereas section to give the background. And I think that this is a powerful resolution in that our apology is in the resolve section. I mean, this is an action resolution. It has, defines our problem, and it defines what we would like to see as an outcome. And so I think want to just lift up the words in this resolution, which are oftentimes background. And in this case, they're our call to action. And I really appreciate that. And I do want to say before I open it up to other comments from my colleagues, just sincere gratitude and respect to Mr. Cruz and Ms. Fort for their leadership on this initiative. Most resolutions do not come through our council with 7 authors, and just shows the work that's been put in, the background work that's been put into this, the momentum that's behind it. When I met last week with Mr. Cruz, just recognizing that, well, and as Ms. Ford pointed out, we have an opportunity here to lead and to define this course, and our eyes are on us, and momentum is growing. So I just want to thank the leadership of Mr. Cruz and Ms. Ford, and then as well as Ms. Prince and council members on bringing this forward and taking this initiative from our council, from the council's perspective, and not waiting. I think this can't wait. I see Ms. Yang's hands up, so I will point or call on her to share comments.
Thanks, Council President. Georgia and Traherne, I want to say thank you as well for being here and for leading this effort. We're here today because of your leadership, and I know that if we could have every single leader who's been working alongside you for many years here, I know there'd be thousands of people, because I also feel that I also know that reparations, it isn't just like a movement here in St. Paul, but it's all across our country. And we are, we've made baby steps today in getting further in that. And so what I wanted to say is thank you. Thank you for your courage in continuing to share your story and the story of your people as well and your ancestors. Racism, works in its own way to erase us of our story. And I want to say thank you for always bringing it back to public memory, because that's how we will continue to remember what has happened to us, what's happened to people all across our country for generations, and how we can use that to actually achieve the type of world that we want to live in. And so I'm very humbled and honored to be able to meet you both and to also be a co-sponsor for this, and look forward to working together with you so we can make this come into fruition.
Thank you, Ms. Yang. Are there other comments from council members at this time? Ms. Jalali.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much to Traherne and Georgia for being here, and I appreciate the comments that have been made. I think that what's important for me moving forward is that we look at not only what the resolution asks for, which is continuing engagement, making sure we're centering this work on our communities most impacted here in St. Paul, but that we can take a lens of reparation and wealth restoration across all areas of our work that we do as a council. There's a lot of work that we do that is about restoring wealth and things that were taken because of historical harm, and it doesn't always get labeled that. And I think that's also important to keep in mind as a lens. With that said, there is a specific policy agenda and movement around reparations in our country for a reason. It is because it's a specific remedy. I do support that remedy. I do want to make sure it's more than a resolution that we're starting with today, that we get to a place as a community where we are actually able to deliver a form of reparations to folks in our community who are deserving of and need this support. And I think that is a much bigger conversation with state and federal partners. And I really hope that at least by using our platform today to help ignite that and renew and lift up longstanding calls within our community, that other government partners take notice and do the work that we're also doing to educate ourselves and keep supporting. So I simply wanted to offer that today, and I really appreciate the chance to speak on this issue and that it's before us.
Thank you, Ms. Jalali. See Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Traherne and Georgia, for your leadership on this. I know that this is a long road ahead, but it's the right thing to do. And when it's the right thing to do, it's the easy thing to do. And so I look forward to following this in every step of the way and how we can help. And it's meaningful to me in my experience because, when I came to this country as a political refugee, I came here thinking that America would be paradise. That was the word that I remember as a kid. It would be paradise. And, when we got here, they put us in the projects, in the public housing. My neighbors were Native Americans and African Americans, and we were all poor. We live in roach and mice infested home. And as a 8-year-old, you don't understand how people came to be about where we are. It just is, and you don't know what you don't know at that time. And it wasn't until we're doing Black History Month, and and I did my report on the Underground Railroad, because in the projects there were train track along where we were at. So I thought it was about train, and I was surprised when it was about Harriet Tubman and her people, how they were persecuted, they were displaced, they were enslaved, they were killed. And that was my people. That was our experience through the war and getting here. And I think that sparked my interest in African American study and the civil rights movement. And so, at a very early age, that has formulated my public policy and my fight for racial justice. And so, as an adult looking back, there's no amount of money or benefit that could ever replace the tragedy, the trauma over the hundreds of years that the African American community has experienced and been displaced, the family taken apart. Because I can't imagine that happening to myself and my family. And so this work is so important, and we have to continue to recognize that and to tell this story and to fight and try to make things right. And if we could resolve the racial injustice in this country, then other countries that are having ethnic issues and wars, and they can do what we can do here too. And so that's why this is so important. And you two and this council, we're at the right moment and the right time to fight for this. So just really honor and privilege to be working on this resolution and to continue the fight going forward. So thank you so much for your leadership.
Great. And I'm looking to see if others have comments at this time. And I know we're at the very beginning of a long process, and we'll have other opportunities as well to weigh in. So we will, I'm going to push back to Ms. Prince before we close out here today. Ms. Prince, I believe you're muted.
I guess I'm on mute in 2021 as well. In any event, I am so grateful to this council, and I am so grateful to Mr. Cruz and Ms. Fort for their leadership in creating this movement in St. Paul and bringing this resolution forward. This is the start of a new community conversation, one of truth, reconciliation, and action, with the goal of creating a commission to direct the city's investments in closing and eliminating racial disparities in our city. As we have all said, this resolution represents this council's commitment to racial healing and to a process aimed at repairing racial injustice. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. I do see Mr. Cruz has a hand up, and so I'll bounce back to you quick.
I just wanted to repeat Mrs. Prince's sentiments as far as thanking this council for being the body that it is, for us to even be able to bring this resolution forward, and to be considering what happened at the White House last week. I think that the city council was taking a bold leadership step with voting on this resolution today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, we will take a motion then from Ms. Prince for approval. Is there further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Jalali.
Aye.
Naker.
Aye.
Prince.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Tolbert.
Yes.
Yang.
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item number 18 is the staff report from the administration.
All right. Last week was obviously a challenging week to have a meeting. I think today, in a way, similarly distracting. But we did have a few items on our agenda that we needed to push off until this week. We had a report, or we had questions about a police training that was coming up, or a contract that we signed for use of the vacant Sears building on Rice Street. And so Deputy Chief Stacy Murphy is here with prepared to answer questions that we had last week. And then in addition to that, Deputy Mayor Tincher and Director Cervantes are here to do the presentation about the unsheltered encampment work that we heard about in December, and just an update on progress on the initiative of the city. So we're going to first start with Deputy Chief Murphy and get an update or answers to the questions that were brought up last week, and then move on to the encampment conversation. So I will turn things over to Ms. Murphy.
Thank you, Council President Brenmoen, and good afternoon, everyone. So last week, like was just mentioned, we had put forth a request to utilize the vacant Sears building for some training that we have going on right now. And Judy Hansen from the City Attorney's Office was here on our behalf for that lease agreement, and she filled me on a few questions that you guys had. So I just wanted to update you on our training and the use of that facility. So we did start our training yesterday, and it's going to go through the end of February. The training is a joint training with one of our mutual aid partners here in the East Metro, so Washington County, Dakota County, and Ramsey County, as well as St. Paul Fire. So we're all working together during this training, and the reason that it's so important is we really are working to, everyone knows that we're in a very different world than we were in even a year from now. So we're really working to train our folks and those outside agencies that we anticipate working with in the future on how to facilitate safe protests, marches, demonstrations, and really how to respond to those. We hold our folks to a very high standard, and in order to make sure that they're meeting that high standard, we really do have to make that we're training frequently. So we train in a variety of different topics, and this is just one of those topics that we are training them on right now. Everyone, all of our sworn staff are going to be going through the training. And it really is, figuring out how to best work with our partners, including fire, which historically we haven't done a lot of training with our fire department. So that really is critical to know, how they respond, how we respond, and how we can best work together. So that's a really big piece of this training that we're doing. Another question that was raised is why we decided to use the Sears facility. So we did look at a few other locations. So our police training facility, which is located up on Lafayette, we looked at that, as well as Herberger's, Kmart, Walmart, Macy's, some of our rec centers. So we looked at a variety of different spaces. And for a variety of reasons, Sears was the best fit for us. We all know that we're in a COVID world, so we had to have a facility that was large and very open to do the type of training that we are doing, as well as we have a very large group of people to get through this training. So we had to have it big enough to take those groups of people and spread them out to make sure that everyone was safe due to COVID. So that's why this facility just fit our needs really well. It also, like I said, is vacant, so that needs to be a really good fit. I believe those were the questions that I was told that you guys had. If there's any other questions that you have regarding training or the use of the Sears facility, I would certainly be happy to answer them.
Deputy Chief, one of the questions that came up, and I know we had a chance to chat briefly, was just kind of the broader context of, what do we say when there's a protest? What are the guidelines around protest? What can people carry, what can't they carry, and just kind of those bigger questions. And you had mentioned that there's a work group, kind of working on creating these definitions that will be coming back to us. Do you want to share a little bit about that? Because I know in particular, Mr. Tao asked those questions, and the council was interested in the answers to those questions. And it sounds like we're looking at it in a fairly global way to create consistency.
Yes, so thank you for bringing that up. So we are working very closely with the City Attorney's Office. So we have discovered, over this past year in 2020, we responded to 225 different demonstrations, protests, and marches. That is a lot of demonstrations. That's a lot of time. That is a lot of resources. So our approach is really to facilitate a safe space for folks to be able to demonstrate and to get their point across, their viewpoint, no matter what it is. So regarding that, there's just been a lot of questions because we're really in a very unique place right now with the large number of events that we've been having and with very differing opinions when folks do come together, in particular when we have both sides protesting and counter protesting each other, and how do we best approach those? So we're working very closely with the city attorney's office. We have found what we believe to be some gaps in our current city ordinances that we have. So with us in the city attorney's office, we are working to draft, and actually the draft is completed, draft of an update to our protest, our public assemblies city ordinance that we will be bringing forward to the council fairly soon. They are getting the resolution put together right now. So we'll be bringing that to you. And when we bring that forward, I think that is a really good time to address the more global thought process of how we respond to demonstrations, any specific questions that folks may have regarding civil unrest and demonstrations and protests, because we're really looking at this in a much broader scope.
Thank you. Are there outstanding questions for Deputy Chief Murphy? All right. It looks like Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. I was just curious, as part of the trainings, what part of the training it could be viewed by the public if it's outside? Is that something that's welcome?
Yep, so the majority of the training is indoors. We do have one scenario very specifically where we're working with fire. So if you're familiar with the Sears facility on the north end, there is what used to be that auto zone, like the auto repair part of Sears, so separate building to the north of the larger Sears property. So in between those two buildings, we do a scenario where we bring in fire trucks, and we do a response to if we were to have a group that came and was trying to do some damage or a fire or something like that at that auto zone. So it's really what the community would see is if they were driving by, they would see fire trucks. They would see probably, I think we have 2 police vehicles out there, and that's all that they would see. So it's not like a big protest or anything like that. It really is, how do we create a safe environment for the fire department to respond? And that's the only thing that the community would see from outside. And the reason we have to do that outdoors is really to figure out how we can best help the fire department, because obviously with their large trucks, we can't do that indoors. But that is the only part that is outdoors.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. And I think that overall, our overarching thing that I heard last week from my colleagues was just that we recognize that not everything can be shared. I mean, obviously we don't want to, not everything can be shared, but to the extent that it can be included in items that we're passing through Legistar, it's really helpful for us to have a better understanding when we vote on contracts, and also to be able to share with our community members if they have questions. To Mr. Tao's point, if folks understand that we're having a training, if they see those activities, they know what's going on, and we can also answer those questions. So I know last week was a highly unusual week. We really appreciate your work last week and this week, and then also in the weeks in front of us. It sounds like our police are going to be tested and stretched here potentially, and so I appreciate the diligence and the work that you're doing to train, because 225 protests in 1 year in one city is an awful lot of protests in one city. It's a full 2/3 of the days. So we appreciate, I have to agree, and I think I said last week, this training is so important. I mean, if you're going to be effective and you're going to be able to create a safe environment for protesters who mean no harm, this work is necessary. So we thank you for that as well. We voted on the item last week, so that will go ahead. And but we do appreciate your coming back today for this report. So thank you so much, Deputy Chief.
Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. All right, we will shift gears. We have Deputy Mayor Tincher in the house and Director Cervantes as well. I'm not sure. I know we have a presentation that we'll be looking at, and I want to make sure. I'm sure is probably already on this, but that we have. Was it Jade that was?
Yeah, and she's a presenter, so she can share.
Great. All right, welcome, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Council President Bredmoen, council members. I will jump in. I'm just trying to see if we have the presentation up. Great. Okay. I will trust Jade to drive. So a lot of work has been done since August when Ramsey County Manager Ryan O'Connor and I briefed you on the city's and the county's coordinated efforts to respond to the housing crisis that was exacerbated by COVID-19. At that time, we briefed you on the challenges the COVID-19 pandemic created for our residents experiencing homelessness, the impacts on the existing programming and services that were available to support them, and we provided an overview on the strategies we pursued to address the initial needs. Most importantly, we described the action plans we were implementing to meet the growing need. Our challenge was that we needed to act very quickly to have additional capacity before the cold weather arrived, as well as before the COVID relief funding expired on December 31st, 2020. Our opportunity, though, was that we had new funding that we could invest in long-term strategic ways that would serve our residents experiencing homelessness, not just through the COVID pandemic, but well into the future. Today, I'll provide a progress report on those action plans, and Director Cervantes and I are available to take any questions. On the second slide, this slide is from that August presentation. As you recall, at that time, we had nearly 400 residents sheltering outdoors in St. Paul, as compared to about 30 in any given week in 2019. Hearing directly from our residents experiencing homelessness, we knew then that we needed to provide more individual rooms. We heard the privacy requests and the safety concerns related to COVID. We knew that storage of belongings and transportation were issues that were barriers to moving indoors. We understood that people wanted to stay with their partners and with their pets. We also knew that we needed more day space options for people experiencing homelessness, a place where they could go to get support, take a shower, do laundry, or just talk to someone and enjoy a cup of coffee. We particularly needed this type of space because of COVID impacts and the closure of so many indoor public spaces like our public libraries. So we got to work, and the next few slides are the results of what we've been able to achieve toward those goals in just 4 months. Slide 3 is a photograph of Bethesda and the rooms that are available there. In addition to the hotel program, Ramsey County began in early 2020 to address shelter program capacity. Multiple new facilities are now open. These provide individual housing units with options to serve couples, including gay and lesbian couples. Families with children are provided individual housing options in additional locations as well. These added individual rooms are available to individuals 24/7. Residents can come and go, but they can't leave their room vacant for longer than 48 hours. On slide 4, this is a photograph of Mary Hall, another addition that was made available through COVID funding. And then slide 5 is Luther Seminary Stube Hall that's available as well. I don't have a slide with a photograph, but another additional facility is Provincial House in Highland Park, which is expected to be added in March. And that will serve up to 20 families with children experiencing homelessness through the Project Home program. And I know that Councilmember Tolbert has been very helpful in that process and moving that forward. And so I'll pause in case Councilmember Tolbert would like to add anything about that space.
I'm Mr. Tolbert. Did you want to add something, or are we fine moving forth?
Not at this time, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're already at the temporary emergency shelter spaces at Harriet Island and Duluth and Case. Those facilities St. Paul secured funding from the state in mid-November to make those 2 city buildings available as emergency shelters for residents experiencing homelessness. They were open through December 31st. Those are congregate settings, and they were never intended to be long-term options, but they were necessary temporary spaces that we needed to make available as options to get in from the cold until Bethesda and all of those other operations were up and running. And so I wanted to add those photographs just to make it clear the difference between when we talk about in our shelter programming, the difference between when we say it's individual rooms versus those congregate settings. On slide 7, I included this. It's the referral process with Ramsey County. What city staff is doing is for all of the encampments throughout the city, we're engaging residents staying at encampments to ensure that they know and have access to the indoor options that are now available. So in advance of a closing, but also, for all individuals that are sheltering outdoors, the city and the county are confirming availability of indoor housing units for all residents, and we're making a really strong effort to get to all individuals in advance of any of the closings that are occurring. On slide 8, just to speak to the safety and the stability of the shelter operations, all options in the Ramsey County Shelter Program have on-site staff 24/7. The staff reflect the residents and have diverse experiences. They work to build relationships with residents and are CPR and Narcan trained. The wraparound services are provided in all of their programs: 3 meals per day, on-site mental health services, transportation services, healthcare, and nursing. And the goal is to provide pathways to housing stability with on-site benefit and housing navigation provided, as well as support to remove barriers to housing. Trauma-informed security rooted in de-escalation is provided 24/7 at all locations, and all shelter operations are following the CDC and the Minnesota Department of Health guidance to protect clients and staff from COVID. Shelters also have in place COVID testing protocols, and shelter staff provide services and referrals when respite care is needed. If we go to slide 9, Freedom House in downtown St. Paul, operated by Listening House, is now open every day, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's the former fire station on West 7th, and it was an ideal location for that needed day space services that I mentioned. It has a full kitchen, showers, laundry services, and beds for people to get sleep during the day, which is particularly helpful for our residents experiencing homelessness who work overnights. It's a wonderfully welcoming place to get services or just talk to someone and enjoy a cup of coffee. And Councilmember Naker, I'm really grateful for the work that you did to help make this a success. And I'll give you an opportunity now or later to add anything around Freedom House.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. I'm really grateful for your leadership on this, and I'm especially grateful to my constituents in the West 7th neighborhood who just opened their arms and warmly welcomed this addition to the neighborhood, and couldn't have been more generous with their hospitality and their excitement about this new development. I'm actually touring Freedom House tomorrow afternoon, so I'll have more to say about it at that time. But really glad that Ward 2 could be home to this space.
That's great. I'll move to slide 10 and the update on Action Plan 2. While we were working to add the additional rooms needed to serve the increased need, we were simultaneously working to meet the basic needs of those sheltering outdoors. Those efforts included sanitary services, partnering with a nonprofit to provide hot meals, increased garbage service, and medical support. However, the variables for a health and safety risk assessment of an encampment are very different in the summer as compared to the winter. And dangerous sub-freezing temperatures and wind chills create concerns around hypothermia and frostbite. And in response to that cold weather, there's a dramatic increase in fires and the use of propane and other heating mechanisms. And those conditions present significant safety risks not only to the individuals staying in encampments, but to paramedics and firefighters who respond to emergencies at those sites. So if we go to slide 11, these photographs are from fires at various encampments. The video clip that I'll ask Jade to play is a propane explosion at the Ramsey County compost site. It's an encampment that we closed a little bit earlier this month. In the video, you can hear the sirens from the fire department on their way to respond to the fire when the propane explosion happens. There were individuals at the encampment when this occurred, and fortunately, no one was injured in this accident. So if we go to slide 12, what are our immediate next steps? We have additional encampments that are scheduled to be closed. Our process will continue to be the same. Our goal is to find indoor options for people who are sheltering outdoors. We're discussing and want to be very thoughtful about the timing and plans for Lower Landing. While that location has the same, and in some cases greater risks as the sites that we've already closed, it is in walking distance to Safe Space, the overnight emergency shelter. And so we are trying to be very, very thoughtful around the timing and the rationale for doing those risk assessments and balance that as well as we possibly can. The longer term next steps, on this slide, I've included two graphics, and one is the housing continuum from the Minnesota Housing Partnership, and the other a depiction of the homeless service system flow from Heading Home Ramsey. And I think these two graphics help provide a focus to any policy conversations about what we need to do and the partnerships that we need to have to better serve our residents experiencing homelessness. And as you all know, prior to COVID, Mayor Carter and this council, along with our partners in Ramsey County and St. Paul Public Schools, we were responding to the housing crisis with a variety of strategies from across the spectrum of needs, including initiatives such as the Housing Trust Fund, the 4D Affordable Housing Incentive Program, prioritizing affordable housing and city-supported projects, Families First, and tenant protections. In addition, a couple years ago, the city really started leaning in and coordinating across departments and deepening our partnerships with the county and service providers to support the work of helping connect residents sheltering outdoors to resources. And this year, the city's approach has evolved even further, from tracking numbers of people and locations of encampments to knowing names and stories and struggles. And this level of engagement is going to be incredibly important as, you know, our community, this council and the mayor and this administration, as our whole community continues to grapple with how do we best prioritize investments and resources. This helps us actually know the level of detail that we engage in now as a city. It helps us to actually know how many people need what type of housing and what strategies are needed to effectively and responsibly meet each person where they are in that moment. And then if we go to slide 13, I'm gonna wrap here and go to discussion and questions. But I use this graphic to visualize that our city team's ongoing response and active engagement with our residents experiencing homelessness has helped us better understand so many of the individual situations, the support and the advance, and it allowed us to support and advance individualized solutions, and most importantly, identify the gaps that exist for some of the most vulnerable people that we need to find options for. And so I give this graphic because it helps me remember to attach the stories and the examples to the policy conversations, because I think it just helps us make better decisions. So so in discussion and answers, I'll try to tap into some of those examples as we move forward. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor. And I think one of our biggest challenges throughout COVID has just been there's so much to communicate and so many different audience who need to receive information. And the work that is happening here is unprecedented. The commitment to people's individual needs and the tracking of their individual needs, and then using that information to help us make decisions going forward. The partnership with Ramsey County, the partnership to the extent it's there with the state of Minnesota, the partnership with our social services organizations, and is extraordinary. And I think that sometimes people want to lump the work that's happening in St. Paul with what's happening in Minneapolis or what's happening in other parts of the country. And in fact, it's an extraordinary effort that has taken place here that I think the word dignity and empathy come before any other things that I say when I talk to people about the work that we're doing here. And so I want to acknowledge that, and also just appreciating this presentation. I think it's something that we can share with our community members who have asked questions about this work and explain in a clear way what we are doing and what we're not doing. And so I just want to thank you very much for your work and your leadership on this, and for the report back. And I know that we'll probably get another report back. And really the way that you framed up this end slide is that this is just the beginning, and we're going to be using this information to help guide our path forward. So I want to start out with that gratitude and thank you for including us in this conversation and along the way. Like Ms. Naker mentioned, I'll be visiting Bethesda later this week, just to understand firsthand what kind of accommodations that we've been able to put together in the individual rooms. Again, dignity, empathy, recognizing that people have partners, loved ones that they want to be with, and just the care that's been given there has been extraordinary. So thank you. If people have questions, the deputy mayor said she's ready to take them. So I'm looking to Ms. Jalali and then Ms. Naker, who have hands up.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Deputy Mayor, for being back again. I always don't know where to start because I feel like this issue is all I think about these days. And, I was out this weekend with yourself. We went to the Snelling 94 site. We've talked to people, and the upcoming removals that are scheduled are happening in Ward 4, and it's very much on my mind as a councilwoman. We've been supporting those sites. We've been working with groups like St. Paul Camps Hub. We've been working with Neighbors Helping Neighbors. There's so many different groups and networks of people supporting encampments around Ward 4. And as someone who's tried to, even holding the complexity expressed at previous disapproval or opposition to removals, I also do recognize, I'm not going to dispute the video of the propane explosion. Like, that is the extreme end of what we understand as safety concerns. But I do want to lift up a letter that's been sent to everyone on our council that is from a coalition of organizations that does ask for a policy review and an emergency ordinance to halt the removals. I think that it would be worth looking at how can we tighten up and clarify the criteria, or just formalize in practice a lot of choices that you all have already chosen to do proactively. We haven't had to push you to take on some of the better practices, but it is worth codifying. I guess this is a request more to my colleagues here on the call, as much as it is to you, Deputy Mayor, to look at some of those requests and try to have that policy conversation, because I think that it's important and it would help codify what are our standards for encampment support, and what actually what is the threshold for when we make the difficult decision to remove a camp and clear a camp, because every removal, no matter how gentle, can still feel very hurtful. When it isn't entirely voluntary, it can be very hard, emotional, and painful. And so I do want to just, I have been taking that letter to heart, and I've been getting asked about it in my community meetings and my Zooms, and just people I talk to in my work now, even though I'm at my apartment. I have the privilege to be at my apartment. And then the other piece that I do have a question for you, since me and you talk regularly, so I don't mean to talk to you on here as if we never talk, but I have a question about, just as we look to the next phase, I just continue to believe we're going to be in this cycle until we get homes for people. And I'm not alone or exemplary in believing that. I'm not trying to say that as anything profound, but I just really strongly believe that we as a city are putting tremendous resource into response and expanding shelter capacity and all these different things that you've presented to us about. We need an effort to create indoor living communities for people. We need to be able to use our CARES money to buy and like have homes where people can live. And the state and the feds need to get in the game and I'm tired of like all of our partners, except for basically the county, feeling like it's just a distant problem and not like in their parks or in their streets. And then we're just the ones that are constantly working on it, but we're working overtime with resource that's not proportionate to their responsibility to this problem. So what's our effort as a city to go as strongly as we can to the people who represent us as a state and a federal delegation and say, we actually just still need you to do a lot more so that we can house people. Like we need to permanently house people. I've had meetings about our legislative agenda with Talmay and folks representing us at the legislature. We have Aisha Gomez chairing up the Homelessness Prevention Committee. Like I do think stars are aligning, but I'm desperate to get out of this cycle. And I know that you know better than most people, the folks outside, and that they're desperate to get out too. And the activists who have helped keep people alive this winter know that too. So can you speak a little to like your biggest hopes and dreams for getting the resource we need and government partners? I do feel like we need to start getting candid with people who also represent our city, because like complacency and promises that aren't coming through isn't good enough anymore. And I'm sort of reaching a breaking point with it personally. So keeping it extra real in 2021, and that was a lot. I appreciate people letting me go, but that's what I'd love to hear about, if you will, Deputy Mayor.
Absolutely. So Council President Brenmoen, Councilmember Jalali, Jade, if you could go back one slide. I'm going to start with that heading home, Ramsey, the homeless service system flow. I think the first piece of what you were speaking to is, and I will say this as often as I possibly can, we needed to bring capacity into that middle area where people experiencing homelessness, you know, the shelter supports and what's happening in shelter. We needed more individual rooms. We needed to redesign that space. But the goal cannot and should not be that people long-term get stuck in that space. And so I think what you're speaking to is we need to figure out how we move into that, you know, how many people and how quickly and what do we need to add to the inventory so that we get people moved into permanent housing solutions that are what they want. And so that could be, I know that many on this council, Councilmember Naker, you and others are very interested in advancing tiny home communities and other things. And so I think it is tied to the answers for how we don't have encampments, but it's because I think that what people who are finding themselves in encampments, the options that they really want, we need to address those in those permanent housing solutions. And for many folks, they may need a stop in that middle space so that they can have support and some help to get to that permanent solution. But we absolutely need to do some work in that third space. And what I will say is the city, our housing director and our PED department, in as much as Director Cervantes and his team are so engaged in the encampment work, our PED staff and the staff at the city, we need that same level of intensity in that permanent housing solutions, advancing those with our partners in Ramsey County, the state, and others. The example, just to touch on, I wanted to tell a really quick story about a woman who was at the Mounds encampment when we did the closing. She, you know, part of our approach, we never want to further traumatize. We don't want to add to any of the barriers that people are experiencing. So, you know, we don't want to be in a situation where there's any law enforcement response. What happened with one individual, she did not want to leave. I was actually concerned because, you know, we could get a referral into an individual room, but if she didn't want to take that referral, you know, we're sort of in a place of like, okay, well, what are we going to do here? I will argue that, you know, my opinion was I don't know that she was in a state where she was making the best decisions for herself, for her own public, or for her own health and safety. At the end of the day, what happened was we tried a number of different things, and she has been convicted of a number of things in all of the counties surrounding Ramsey County, except not in Ramsey County. But she was staying in an encampment in St. Paul. What we ended up doing is St. Paul Police Department, we did take her, and she is in jail for prior things. But it goes to that point of the question about what's happening in our encampments, and should we recognize and understand that there are a lot of surrounding counties. It's a regional issue. It's a statewide issue. And we do need some more resources and some more partnership around helping individuals who are finding themselves in St. Paul.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just checking back on hands, and I see Ms. Yang has a hand up and Ms. Prince has a hand up. So let's go to Ms. Yang and then Ms. Prince.
Thanks. I have a few questions. The slide that's labeled safe and stable shelter operations, are all of those like wraparound services and the 24/7 on-site staffing for all of the different shelters you have in your slide here? So Bethesda, Luther Seminary, and Mary Hall, or is it also inclusive of other spaces like Safe Space as well and Freedom House?
So I'll speak on behalf of Ramsey County to the best that I can. I do get this information directly from them. This is for all of the locations that they have that are serving individuals 24/7. So Bethesda, Luther, Mary Hall, those are spaces where individual rooms are provided 24/7. So that staffing model follows that. For Safe Space, they operate overnight, and so the same services are offered. It will differ based on their hours of operation.
Does that mean then if someone were to stay at the shelters, like do they basically have a caseworker who is going to connect them to like housing options or whatever type of support they're looking for? I know many of the folks who I've talked to who are a part of like homeless coalitions, or else even folks in my ward who have been unhoused. One of the things they look for most is support in finding jobs and getting identification on them so that they can go and pursue whatever type of opportunities they're looking for, but they're struggling with that. And so do they have somebody who would then help them with that directly in shelters?
Yes, and again, someone from Ramsey County would be better equipped to speak to very specifically different operations. But yes, my understanding is that is the effort and the goal. What I will say is that many of the street outreach workers, the caseworkers, the nonprofit staff, I've heard the concern that that individuals, if they are moved from outdoor locations to the shelter operations, that there's a concern that their caseworker would not be able to locate them, things like that. That is just, I'm happy to engage in that conversation more, but it is challenging for me to understand how the supports that we know are needed, that case management would be easier having encampment situations where I can clearly describe numerous individuals that I know that I have seen in multiple encampment locations over the weeks. It seems to me that having individuals in a safe, stable room of their own would be helping to facilitate what is already resources that are stretched thin. It seems that helping to encourage individuals to be in those indoor options would actually help facilitate the resources and the individuals who are trying to provide the wraparound services and the getting driver's licenses and finding identification and other documents, job referral services, things like that.
Thanks, Council President. I have a few follow-up questions.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay.
And I do want to let you know that there's 2 other council members who have their hands up as well.
Okay, awesome. My follow-up question is, I'm wondering who is the best person to go to regarding the first question I had, because I actually have been hearing that folks at shelters aren't getting that support and that they're actually not like guaranteed a caseworker when they go to a shelter. And so that is really concerning for me, because I don't see shelters as a permanent option for folks at all. I think that, while there's like this really big push to get folks inside, when they don't actually get that support, then they just end up back in the streets or in encampments again. And so to me, it's really important to get that figured out. I also want to say that while I do recognize that it's more accessible when folks are at shelters so that we can provide them the type of support they need, what has been really frustrating for me is that folks who have been unhoused in my ward and living in, let's say, for example, the Marilyn Johnson encampment, who have been there for months, have now been evicted. And now, for the ones who weren't willing to go into shelter, we don't know where they are. We don't know whether they're at a different encampment or what location they are now. And so that's why I don't support the evictions. I think that it has displaced a lot of the folks who are unwilling to go into shelter for many different reasons. And I think that that's actually like a really big missing piece in the plan here from the mayor's administration, because I feel like your plan, it's only addressing, or catering to folks who are unhoused and willing to go into shelter, but not for the folks who aren't willing to. And so that's why, I think that letter that Councilmember Jalali uplifted is so important, because we're actually trying to figure out, what does it look like for us to meet that missing hole in the plan. And I would really like to see more of an effort to have that conversation rather than to just not talk about it at all. Because, I think everyone here is super invested in trying to solve issues around homelessness, and we won't get there if we're not willing to talk about it. And so in saying that, I hope that we can get to a place where we can get folks from the mayor's administration, the council here, to actually talk about that, and also to pass an emergency ordinance stopping the evictions, so that we can start getting to work and talking about what that plan looks like. So I put a lot of stuff there in what I said, but my question is about who I can go to from the county to verify the accuracy and information that I've been getting from you, and then also from hearing from folks who are doing advocacy work around this too. And I would really like to hear your response to the letter that both Councilmember Jalali and I mentioned, and whether you would be willing to have a conversation about that some more.
Sure. Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Yang, the individuals at Ramsey County that I work with the most, Ryan O'Connor, Commissioner Mattis Castillo, I know that they would always be available to answer questions. And then operationally, Keith Lattimore is the new director. And so I think he would have a lot of insight on the operations. To the question about the letter and the conversation, I wholeheartedly agree. I think we need to have really open, honest, candid conversations. And the thing that I would say is, the question about whether or not we close encampments, I think that where I'd like to start that conversation is, what is the end goal of the conversation? And if the end goal of the conversation is to debate the merits of how we have individuals, our residents, sleeping in tents in sub-freezing temperatures in Minnesota, I just have to start that conversation really openly and honestly that I don't value that conversation. I do value the conversation about really digging into the gaps and the needs that we have in order to provide every single thing we can to make people safe. And the two stories that I want to share are the individuals that I think you're thinking of. You and I both know them. We've visited them together. I went multiple times with members of our leadership from our fire department and others on our work group, and I talked to multiple different individuals at the sites where it was community, it was many Hmong speakers, and the things that we said and what I told them was, I will work with Ramsey County. We can guarantee that we can get you individual rooms at the same location so that you could stay together, and we even I offered multiple people. I said, can you go with us now? Will you go as a representative of this community? Will you go to the location and then come back and report back what it looks like? And we were doing everything we could to facilitate that. And Ramsey County was a strong, willing partner to facilitate that. So our goal is, how do we knock down the barriers and how do we improve shelter operations and services and programs we're providing? Because we don't want people to be left outside. The other story that I will say that we need to be really open and honest and tell these stories is that on Saturday, the woman that Councilmember Jalali and I talked to for a long time, I thought I was going to get her to go in. I thought she was ready. In that moment on Saturday, she was ready to go. I had a referral. I called the fire department. We were going to make arrangements. We could come pick her up. I helped her pack her belongings into suitcases. And she had an option to go to Luther. And she said to me when we were ready, she said, I want to go to the store. I need to get some alcohol. And what I did was I called and I confirmed my knowledge of the shelter program. And I said, and what they told me was, we're here. We just want her inside. She can't bring alcohol into the facility, but it is okay if she is intoxicated here. So to your point, I am always here to have those conversations, but I want to have conversations about what we need to do to help support people and get them into safe, indoor, stable places. And whatever we need to do to add once we get them there, I'm all for it.
Thank you. Okay, I see Ms. Prince and Ms. Naker still have hands up.
Thank you, Council President Brenmone, and thank you, Deputy Mayor Tincher. I received the letter, as we all did, and I responded almost immediately and provided a link to the city's website, the page that is city's response to homeless encampments. It's in phenomenal detail. It provides really a lot of good information about exactly what we've been talking about today and much of what's been in the PowerPoint presentation that we've seen here. I also made myself available to meet or to talk to anybody at any time. I additionally reached out to the groups that were signers to that letter that were located in my ward. And yesterday, I received my first response to it, and it was from Micah. And I did very specifically ask the question to the deputy mayor's point. I said, you know, if there is a place to get on the type of shelter or the type of alternative that we need to be providing that is not being provided, I am happy to be part of that conversation, but what is it that we're looking for? Because I also agree with the deputy mayor that leaving people outside in the winter in Minnesota is not feasible. It's cruel. And I'm given the examples that in Portland and in Seattle, the city maintains tent cities, which obviously is in a different climate. But beyond that, I have seen a news story about those tent cities. They're beautiful, they're humane, they're good sanitation services, heated tents, and I see families living in them and their children with various cold and flu symptoms from living outside and going to work from those tent cities. And I think this notion that a city-run tent city is anything that we want to provide as the city of St. Paul is something I really want us to get rid of that notion. That is a solution that is not an end. It's not a solution for people who need permanent housing. And I just don't think it's feasible. But I do think that the advocates need to tell us what it is that they're looking for and how many people we need to be providing that third option for. Finally, I think that we all know that the solution is permanent housing. And we've all known over the time that all of us have spent on this council that we have not been adequately funded to provide housing at the deeply affordable levels, or not enough housing. So I really do appreciate the creative thinking that's happening around tiny homes. Today I went back and checked the article about what Minneapolis is doing with putting tiny homes or small living compartments within large warehouses. I'm wondering if that's something we can get to somehow. But I want to say that in the 5 years that I've been on the council, I have gone to dozens of meetings about what are we going to do about homelessness. And it wasn't until the deputy mayor partnered with the county late this summer and through the fall that we started to see some really good solutions to the interim shelter issue with single rooms, with wraparound services, and with meals, 3 meals a day served. And I just want to say that it's a partnership. Again, I've said it several times, but this is a partnership unparalleled and unprecedented to address this issue. So thank you to the deputy mayor. And let's, as a community with the advocates, let's have that conversation about what that third alternative is, because I'm willing to be part of that conversation.
Council President, did you call on me? I think you were on mute, but.
Yep. So thank you, Ms. Prince. And let's move on to Ms. Nicker. I don't see any other hands up beyond that.
Thank you, Council President. Thanks to everyone for this conversation. I really appreciate, Deputy Mayor, your presentation. And I think I just want to acknowledge that everything that you've talked about has been triage in response to a dire emergency and a humanitarian crisis that we have had on our hands for the entire past 10 to 12 months. And I think you and your team have done an incredibly impressive job of dealing with that in a humane way and in a way that frankly balances a lot of different needs. And we've been talking mostly about the needs of our unsheltered residents right now. But I think we also need to acknowledge that on the city council, we represent people who have homes as well. And I have seen in my ward people who have not been able to use their parks or their playgrounds or their sidewalks, the public amenities that we all enjoy, because they have become the place of encampments. And I think we also need to balance the needs of all of our residents. I also appreciate the Deputy Mayor's acknowledgement in the last slides that we have a long-term problem, which is the need for permanent supportive housing and affordable housing at all levels. And I'm excited that tomorrow the Heading Home Ramsey Coalition that the Deputy Mayor mentioned is meeting for the first time in its new form. I have a lot of hope in that group to come up with these longer-term solutions. But I do worry about the letter that we received and I think it's going to take all of us coming together to go to the legislature and to make the request for the significantly more funding that we need to make long-term change. And I worry that we are turning against each other. We are all allies in this fight for those who are unsheltered. We are all allies in this fight for a humane response. But I'm worried that we're turning against each other rather than turning together toward the state to advocate for the dollars that we need. I think once people are forced to live outside, we have already failed. And any response at that point, as we've seen, no matter how carefully planned, is going to be somewhat fraught and imperfect. So the problem is that by the time you get to that point, it's hard to respond successfully. And so I hope we can all come together so that no one is forced to live outside to begin with.
Thank you, Ms. Naker. And I do see Mr. Tolbert has a hand up.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I want to echo what much of what Councilmember Prince as well as Councilmember Naker said, and also lift up the Deputy Mayor and your amazing work on this. Honestly, as you presented here today, you have essentially found indoor housing for every person experiencing homelessness in the city of St. Paul today. That is a huge lift, a huge accomplishment in normal times. You add on the economic recession that we are in, you add on COVID-19 and the difficulties that presents for it, and you add on the unprecedented numbers or historic numbers of people experiencing homelessness within the city of St. Paul and staying in the city of St. Paul and living in the city of St. Paul. You put all those together and it makes it something that I think would have been very difficult to do. But when the deputy mayor got involved, and I know we have Ricardo Cervantes and many staff members from the fire department, DSI, Parks, St. Paul Police Department that are involved as well. But I think what you and your team, Deputy Mayor Tincher, have been able to accomplish to find indoor shelter in Minnesota in an emergency situation and help people who are experiencing homelessness not only stay warm and safe, but have dignity in where they're staying. I think you should be praised, and I think the work that you have done on behalf of the city of St. Paul is something that I'm proud of. I think that story that you told of the woman who you wanted, that you had housing for and decided at the last minute she couldn't go, even the fact that they were willing to let her in intoxicated shows just how far and how much you've gone down to help people. And like I said, every person who is experiencing homelessness, as far as we know, has had the ability to have indoor space. Their belongings are being kept safely for them, free of charge, and it has all been done with dignity and one-on-one touch. And I just want to commend you for the work on this. This is something that, honestly, I think every city and community, if they could do this, they would be proud of it too. Obviously, there's bigger issues, and I'm glad that you pointed out those are the issues that we really need to dig into of how do we stop this from happening in the first place? How do we help people start moving up into the next phase of their life so that they can find long-term affordable housing and get themselves back on their feet. But overall, I appreciate all the work that this administration has done. It is something that I think, like I said, in normal times would have been very difficult. And with the multiple crises that we're facing, it's in some ways heroic. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tolbert. And I really appreciate the comments, particularly from Ms. Prince, Ms. Naker, Mr. Tolbert here, as we're wrapping up this conversation, just in terms of the impact and, kind of the reality of what we're facing in a northern climate. And just a reminder to colleagues, we all have the ability as elected officials to create ordinances, policies to bring to the table for the council to review. And it takes hard work to create those policies, to work in the community to do those. And I've heard Ms. Jalali talking about an interest of looking forward and creating policy. I have not seen legislation for an emergency ordinance. I have not seen legislation for changing any policy. And so I just remind folks, you have a seat at the table. You have power. Put down the megaphone and pick up your cell phone and use it. So that we can talk about those policies in a productive way, like a council is supposed to do, if there's changes that we'd like to see made. And in the meantime, I really do appreciate the hard work of our fire department, our police department, our DSI, our parks, and the deputy mayor and our partners. So thank you very much for this report. We look forward to inviting you back in again. And we thank you very much, as you've heard from everybody at the table, for your work and effort here. Ms. Tincher, it's commendable. Thanks. And if you're saying anything, you are muted. All right. Thank you so much. All right, Ms. Moore, we can shift to our next discussion item.
All right. Item number 19, Resolution 21-24, supporting the second daily train to Chicago.
All right, Ms. Prince.
Yes, thank you. And I can make this quite brief. The good news on the second train is that the Federal Railway Administration approved a $40 million grant in 2020 that we now have to match. We and the state of Minnesota and the state of Wisconsin. Wisconsin has beat us to it. So on behalf of the Great River Rail Commission, I just want to say, for people who may not be aware of this project, that the aim is to increase passenger rail options along the Mississippi River route between the Twin Cities and Chicago. And it's the Twin Cities, Milwaukee, Chicago intercity passenger rail service that will add a second daily round trip train to complement the existing Amtrak Empire Builder service. And the train will be the Amtrak train and the second train will make stops at Union Depot, Red Wing and Winona, and then on to La Crosse and through Wisconsin. The additional benefit that people may not realize from this project is that it will also improve the capital improvements that are being made to the tracks will create new jobs and support existing businesses for the freight rail business. Meanwhile, a second round-trip passenger train from the Twin Cities to Chicago creates new jobs, it supports existing businesses, it increases tourism, and provides better access to colleges and universities along the route. And it's a really economical travel choice and the best mass transit long distance choice for reducing carbon emissions. So everything is good. This council passed a resolution in support of the second train in March of 2019. And by way of the resolution that's before us, we renew our support for the train and we request approval by the Minnesota legislature and Governor Walz of the $10 million request that we'll be making to match the federal $40 million grant in this session, in the 2021 session. So with that, I will move approval. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Thanks, Ms. Prince. And I know when I saw this on the agenda, I wanted to make sure that we pulled it off for discussion just because of everything that you just said. I recently had the great privilege of visiting the state of Montana where the Empire Builder, connects on through to Montana and then beyond. And had two times when my kids were little, had the opportunity to take that train, and it is phenomenal. But I think that service between St. Paul and Chicago, if it's more available, it's more of a viable option for people to get there. And so I fully support the resolution as well. Is there other discussion on this item? All right, seeing none, Ms. Prince moves approval. Roll call.
Jalali.
Aye.
Naker.
Aye.
Prince.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Tolbert.
Yes.
Yang.
Aye.
Council President Brandmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item number 20, Ordinance 21-1 is an emergency ordinance extending the effective date for Legislative Code Chapter 236 pertaining to plastic packaging until January 1st, 2022.
All right, and on this item, I do not believe we have a staff report, but I do want to just make some clarifying information for folks as we're voting on this. There is a mayor's emergency order that extends the plastic packaging for 40 days. The purpose of this ordinance is to create a date certain and extend the to-go packaging to January 1st, 2022. And so for the purposes of an emergency ordinance, there is a requirement that there are 7 votes. And before we go into discussion, I just want to share with folks that I do not plan to support this as it is currently written. And so I want to share that. Let's just to help us frame our discussion, but I completely understand the spirit of this emergency ordinance, and I understand how our restaurants are struggling. We talked about it in our HRA today. When this item came up sort of at the end of last year, one of the suggestions that I threw out was that we could move forward with already delayed enforcement. I mean, we put this out for a year, but instead of imposing fines or other penalties, just use sort of a fix-it ticket model or something to connect businesses who have yet to convert to compostable to those resources, but not delay any further implementation of this. So many of the restaurants that I go to in St. Paul have already taken these steps to do this. So I might propose, just because like I said, I know that we need 7 votes for this, and I don't know if anyone has been organizing votes around it, but that we perhaps consider laying this over and coming up with something that's a bit more palatable. And I don't know where others stand on this item, but I do want to predicate the conversation on the fact that I do not intend to vote for this as it stands. Mr. Tolbert.
Yeah, I mean, I think if it requires 7 votes and we have one person who definitely isn't going to vote for it, we may as well lay it over and see if there's something that can be worked upon to make it more palatable for 7 people. That would be my, what time length would you think? A couple weeks?
Well, we have, I mean, under the mayor's emergency order does extend this for 40 days. So it is delayed at this time. So I think we have a cushion in that regard. It could be, 4 weeks and not have any impact on our businesses. And again, fully understand the spirit behind this. I just feel like we already passed an ordinance that had a year delay and of course didn't plan on COVID. But I would just really appreciate if, given that we have the delay for the businesses, if we could spend some time figuring out how to move forward with this in a more thoughtful way than an emergency ordinance. I see Ms. Prince and Ms. Jalali with hands up. Ms. Prince.
Thank you, Council President Brennan. And I appreciate your position on this. I also, to the point of did we organize around it, there were a couple of our offices that had reached out to Resiliency Chief Stark, and he had moved ahead with this recommendation that we handle it this way with an executive order and then with an emergency ordinance. I'm concerned about this issue, and I'm definitely willing to lay it over so we can talk about it more. But I do want to say a couple things. When we delayed it for a year last year, one of the things that we acknowledged was that we didn't know when Ramsey County curbside composting was going to occur. So one of the reasons that we pushed it back a year was in hopes that that would be closer to a reality. To my knowledge, it's still not close to a reality. And I really feel when we're asking our businesses to move to compostables, and then people bring them home, and their only option for their 1 or 2 compostables a week is to drive to the compostable drop-off point, I think that's kind of a waste of energy. So I am concerned about this from the angle of the curbside compostables. And then I also want to say, and I appreciate that businesses that we go to, there are many businesses who have adopted this because they believe in it. Some businesses on the east side that I go to that are immigrant owned, that may not be in the loop quite as well in terms of this trend in to-go packaging and in with our ordinances, are still using styrofoam. Not a good thing, and we can talk to them about that, but at a time when businesses are suffering. And my third reason is we also are looking at a Department of Safety and Inspections that is not keeping up with the work that we're bringing to it. They couldn't study my wine ordinance. They have stopped doing any number of regulatory inspection activities because of the last report we had, which is that team is so focused on the unsheltered homeless problem and the issues this year from COVID and from civil unrest. So for those reasons, I hope when we lay this over, we could look at what is realistic about even being able to enforce this or do fix-it tickets when it's highly unlikely that enforcing to-go packaging is going to be a priority for our DSI staff in 2021. So those are my arguments for laying it over, but considering that the 1-year delay is really reasonable.
Right. I appreciate that. And I just would say that something that composts in a garbage bag is preferable to styrofoam at any rate. But my goal isn't to, there's no need to go through an emergency ordinance process today. We have 40 days to figure this out. I see Ms. Jalali, then Ms. Yang, then Ms. Neeker with hands up. And there's a motion to lay this matter over for 4 weeks.
Yeah, I guess I would support the motion to lay it over. I was also intending to vote no today on the emergency ordinance, just on the premise that I guess I just disagree that it is a burden. I recognize that it is a change, but that doesn't mean it is a burden. And the reason that we enacted the change was to improve our waste stream and support sustainable practices, and also do so in a way that is accessible and efficient. We are in a time where takeout is a staple of local businesses, and I am, I guess, confused at a scenario where businesses are doing all the composting, like our residents are consuming more takeout than ever, a lot sort of by design, and the output that is coming from that is important to acknowledge in the moment that we're in. So I would vote no, and I'm sorry, I would vote no if we were voting final today, but sounds like we're laying it over, so I'll support that motion. Just wanted to chime in briefly to say where I'm at. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Ms. Yang and then Ms. Neeker.
Thank you. I also support laying it over. Council President, I had a question for you. So based on what you shared earlier, you envision making amendments to, would it be like the penalty section then? Specifically that one, or are there other sections as well too?
You know, I don't actually know. There's a potential that we could shorten the amount of time that we extended this. I'm open to looking at some changes. I just feel like the emergency piece of this is kind of lost on me. There's a 40-day order in by the mayor's office, so I think we can be thoughtful about how we move forward with this and recognizing the challenges, but also our goals. So I would be open to any amendments. Version 2. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And then I have been seeing some businesses in our city post about the changes they've been making to use like more compostable materials within the restaurants. Actually, they've made a full transition. And so I think it'd be like really neat to reach out to them and maybe to even ask, like, how was that transition for them? How can we also support other businesses in doing that too during this time? Like, possibly through having some council members hosting a town hall about it. Or there's like also a lot of different ways we could go about it.
I would be glad to work with you on that. Ms. Snaker.
Thanks, Council President. If we were voting today, I would support this for all of the reasons that Councilmember Prince mentioned. I think for the businesses that have not yet made the conversion, it absolutely is a burden, and it is the last thing that they need right now. I also think it's less confusing to delay an ordinance taking effect than it is to have an ordinance that's on the books, but that we're not actually enforcing. I'm wondering, though, I agree with my colleagues. I'm not sure why this is an emergency ordinance. I think it could easily go through the normal ordinance amendment process, and I would support that.
Okay. And I guess it's, same as I'm thinking. It's like there is the cover of the delay already. So just to use a little bit more, we talk about transparency and thoughtfulness, and I think we have an opportunity to model it here. It sounds like there's desire to move forward, but also agreement that we can do this thoughtfully. So I would move a layover to
4 weeks would be February 10th.
To February 10th. And I don't know if I don't know if it'd be better to just withdraw and bring it back as a regular ordinance. Why don't we, I would move to withdraw this item. Yeah, I'm the author. I withdraw.
All right, item number 20 is withdrawn.
Thank you, colleagues.
Item 21, also an emergency ordinance 21-2, regulating third-party food delivery platforms during the COVID-19 emergency.
And on this item, I do not know if we have a staff report, but this is similar to Minneapolis's move to reduce the commission allowable by platforms from 30% to 15% for food delivery during this emergency time, I think, to get away from gouging. Mr. Tolbert has a hand up. Mr. Tolbert?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'm very supportive of this. I think this is an important ordinance. As we're talking about helping our local businesses, this is something that will really help them out as these third-party vendors take quite a bit of money. The one thing I will add is if staff is on the line, as we heard at the HRA meeting earlier today, it sounded like in order to prove that this happened, the businesses needed to have this evidence in their hands with the actual ordinance. So I would encourage our administration and people on the social media channels for the city to get this out to the businesses so that they can not only know about it and can stop that third party, but also have the proof that they need so that they're not charged at that rate. So whatever that additional step would be needed, but it sounded like that was the slowdown in the similar ordinance that was passed in Minneapolis. But overall, I think this is a really important ordinance for our local businesses, especially our restaurants who are really struggling right now during this pandemic.
Mr. Tolbert, did you just say, or do you recall what sort of evidence or what was it that they requested or said would have been helpful to them?
I think, what he said, and I would say maybe our lawyers could just look at this to ensure, but I think they were looking for the actual ordinance, and it might have been done by emergency ordinance, which as council folks, sometimes can be difficult to find. I know it's taken me a while to search it down, and I knew it existed. So I think probably a printing of this, once it's signed, just mailed out so people can send that proof in, because he mentioned that he was showing us a Star Tribune article about it to whoever the vendor was, that the app vendor that he was using. So I would suggest whatever, maybe our city attorneys can look at what evidence would be needed, and we could send that out with the note that this should suffice as evidence that the city has this ordinance.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure what he said that was, so thank you for that. And also, I think just making sure that we sent out that information to the vendor would probably also be helpful, because it seems like so a little bit of both, but we definitely heard that it ended up being a challenge for the businesses to enforce it on their own. I mean, holding up a newspaper article is, no, really, it's true. Okay, I see Ms. Nicker has a hand up.
Thanks, Council President, and thanks so much, Councilmember Tolbert. That was exactly what I was going to say. I think it was fortuitous that we heard from that business earlier today about exactly this, the concerns with how it's implemented and enforced. And so I just wanted to make sure that our Department of Safety and Inspections would have the capacity to educate and enforce this, in addition to making sure that people, that it's easy for people to report violations. And I also just wanted to put out there that while we are considering this as an emergency ordinance, which means it will expire at the end of the emergency, I would be very open to considering this as an ordinance going forward. I know we have to, the emergency ordinance allows us to pass it more quickly, but I think this is just a good policy in general to support local businesses. So I hope maybe this is something we can kind of get, I don't know if we're going to get notification when these expire, but maybe Council President, we can sort of put a pin in just getting notified once the emergency goes away, and we might want to extend some of these.
Right. Yeah, the list of all things expiring. And I have to be honest, I've never ordered from one of these platforms. I usually pick up myself or stay in. And so does anyone know if they drivers get tips in addition to the 30% gouge? Mr. Tolbert?
So I checked when I think Mr. Grebner was working on this, and this will not affect either the restaurant or the drivers and their tips. This is limiting strictly the third-party vendor's ability to take a percentage of that transaction. So it shouldn't affect either the drivers, delivery drivers, or the restaurants.
Okay, great. That's good information, and we know that the margins at restaurants are razor thin, especially with the limited amount of beverages they're able to sell right now. So sounds like this one might go through 7-0. So I would take that motion from Mr. Tolbert. And wait, Ms. Jalali, did you have a hand up?
No, I decided to not offer my user layman's experience of food delivery apps, and I think it got dealt with. So just taking myself off mute.
All right. Mr. Tolbert moves this emergency ordinance. Roll call.
Jalali,
Aye.
Naker,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Yang.
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The emergency ordinance is adopted. Item 22, Resolution Public Hearing 21-1, authorizing the city to apply and accept $700,000 in grant funding from the St. Paul and Minnesota Foundation for the People's Prosperity Pilot, authorizing the execution of a grant agreement and amending the 2021 Office of Financial Empowerment budget.
And Munir Carter-Ramos has been here the whole time, waiting to make a short staff presentation, and I think he's got a PowerPoint. So we'll tee that up and get a quick update on this resolution public hearing, and then take people's comments. So welcome, Munir. You know that I have notes that Casey Wydrich is going to be presenting your PowerPoint.
Sorry, I was on mute. I'll be the presenter today.
Okay, so you've got the PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I see you just gave me permission, so give me a second. Just let me know when you can see it.
Yep, we can see.
All right, perfect. All right, so here just to give an update as we moved forward to accept some funding here, to apply and accept funding. Just an update on the People's Prosperity Guaranteed Income Pilot. Before I start, I just want to name that a lot of sort of staff time and effort went into standing this program up, including Casey Wiedrich, who's our Financial Capability Program Manager. She's on the line here with me, as well as Jack Smythe, Ikram Kaliso, Katrina Mendoza, and actually many, many other staff from across the city to stand this up. So just as a reminder, Mayor Carter announced the People's Prosperity Pilot through executive order on September 3rd. The council approved the use of CARES funding on September 16th. Today, we're looking to move forward with the first installment of the private philanthropic funding of $700,000. We will be bringing forward an ordinance to council at the end of the month. And just a timestamp, sort of the length of this pilot, we're looking at winter, spring 2022, after the participants receive, the 18 cash transfers. So the exit date will sort of depend, on the enrollment date and when they actually started. In terms of funding partners, Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, which is our national network, received a large gift from Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. Additionally, we have funding support from the Kresge Foundation, St. Paul, Minnesota Foundation, the Department of Human Services, as well as the CARES funding. So we have fully committed and secured our $1.5 million to run this 18-month pilot. And again, today, we're hoping to move forward with accepting those dollars. The $700,000 first installment. So again, it's 150 families, $500 a month for 18 months. And then the babies who are in the program through College Bound will receive an additional $180, in their college savings account. To date, we do have the 150 enrolled, so we've met our target. We've seen almost $350,000 in cash transfers and almost $7,000 been put into babies' college savings accounts on top of their initial $50 seed deposit. Again, as a reminder, the eligibility for the program was College Bound St. Paul, 150 randomly selected families from across the city, must have a COVID impact, and then be at or below 300% of the poverty threshold. In 2020, we had over 3,000 babies that are enrolled in College Bound St. Paul. So you sort of see the babies and sort of where they are all over the city and the families that live there. This is sort of our heat map of concentration, of those college-bound St. Paul families and where those babies, are located. That was just my sliding in a college-bound update there while I could. So People's Prosperity Pilot, we are a couple unique features. We're actually the first municipally run guaranteed income in the program. Others have been run through nonprofits and that sort of thing. There are about 30 cities who've signed on through the Mayors for Guaranteed Income network. So we'll be seeing more and more city governments coming online. And again, our end goal is to push for a federal guaranteed income, knowing that this isn't the place permanently for a guaranteed income program to live within a city. We're the first program in the country to combine college savings accounts and a guaranteed income. Third, we're uniquely focused on families with babies. As you'll see some of the data later on, we are concentrated in communities of color and low wealth neighborhoods. We have a coordinated national evaluation with other demonstration projects. This is done through the University of Pennsylvania's UPenn's Center for Guaranteed Income Research. And then there's turnkey, ready to go kind of federal advocacy strategy as all these 18-month pilots across the United States wrap up in, different cities. In terms of recruitment and enrollment, letters were sent out to randomly selected college-bound families. Letters were put out in 5 different languages. We did have the parents' home, birthplace of origin, and could do some targeting around, languages and that sort of thing. We had follow-up phone calls, flyer drops, at homes, that sort of thing. Then they went through an enrollment appointment with city staff. After that point, we want to make sure everyone made an informed decision, particularly if they were enrolled in public benefits. So they participated in a benefits counseling session, and that was using the Children's Defense Fund's Economic Stability Indicator tool. And the purpose of that was to look at their proximity to a benefits cliff or reduction in benefits. And basically, after that benefits counseling session, they decided whether or not to actually participate in the program. Obviously, this is probably small, you can't see it, but this is the actual economic stability indicator tool. So it would have been, it's an online tool offered by the Children's Defense Fund, and our benefits review counselors who we contracted out with could look at every single public benefit based on the composition of a family. You could put in the $500 extra, and then it would kind of show you, a summary, of changes in your benefits and benefit by benefit if there was going to be a reduction in it. I'm not going to go through, in tons of detail there, but that was sort of the process. And they had a conversation with the counselor about, how to move forward and eventually whether to participate, in the program or not. One thing is to note is that about 25% of our enrollment meetings actually happen in a language other than English, 9 different languages. And many of these were actually done by different city staff, particularly the city's language line that was stood up, during, COVID-19. We sent out 486 letters to get to the 150 enrolled, which is about a 32% response rate. The blues are the ones who actually got, who enrolled in the program, and then, the red are those who get enrolled in the program, and then the blues are where all the letters, actually went to reach out to families who are enrolled in College Bound St. Paul. We heard actually from our national evaluator that the response rate we had at 32% is higher than most in this type of approach, which she said is actually 12.5%. So we had almost 3 times more likely to do that.
And Munir, sorry to interrupt you, but is that because we knew we were able to target because we had the college-bound information? Do you think?
Yeah, I think that has a huge part of it. I think there are folks who are familiar with College Bound St. Paul. They'd previously been enrolled in 2020 in it. So when the package showed up, it said College Bound St. Paul and the People's Prosperity Pilot. It increased that. And I also say the groundwork of, our staff, reaching out, calling, dropping, lid off at doors, every sort of approach, multiple mailings, to increase the likelihood of enrollment, particularly, on a short timeline as we're looking to use as much care funding as possible. Response, sort of laying it out there, but of the letters that were sent out, 282 that respond or sort of missed the end deadline. 40 said that they weren't eligible, and they let us know that. Before the enrollment meetings, this would have been folks said, I'm not interested. And then 6 folks after the benefits counseling decided not to participate in the program, and we ultimately landed on 150. So this is sort of the geographic dispersion. We actually have it broken down by ward, so you can kind of see where we see participants live in every ward of the city, and significant enrollment in communities of color, low wealth communities, heavy enrollment on the east side, North End, and Frogtown, Rondo neighborhoods in particular. What we know about the participants, 40% identified as Black. We have that actually broke down by different cultural communities, 25% identified as Asian, 19% as white, 50% as Latinx, 3% as American Indian, Alaska Native, and then 1 identified as multicultural. In terms of public benefit participation, 12% of folks weren't enrolled in any public benefits, 88% were. On average, folks participated in 3 different public benefits. On the right, you'll see, which makes sense with the age group, was with WIC, Women, Infant, and Children program. So that's really targeted to, families with babies. And that was 79% of participants. And again, everyone went through the benefits counseling to decide, if it made sense to do it. And as the mayor talks about this, he often actually talks about with WIC, when he had his first kid 14 years ago, they were enrolled in WIC, and that they could get as much peanut butter and milk and and eggs as they wanted, but their oldest daughter was allergic to all those things. So WIC, the mayor's experience, as he's talked about, wasn't a program that had the type of flexibility that they needed, and I think we're seeing that also bear out with this program. This has a lot of text on it, a lot of data here, but this is around how folks qualified in with their COVID-19 impact. The chart on the left was that 68% of folks, said that, most of it was they were laid off, furloughed, or had reduced hours. The impact two there, 63% of folks said they were unable to work due to childcare. And then the third was closing reduced hours for a business that they own or operate. On the right-hand side, this is more of the combination of looking at multiple reasons why, and we sort of broke that out. So 28% both got laid off or had reduced hours and couldn't work due to childcare. 22% were unable to work due to childcare alone, and then 24% were unable to work just because of being laid off or having reduced hours. So with that said, that is our update today. We'll continue to come back to the council to update you on what we learned about spending and other types of impacts that the People's Prosperity Pilot has. So with all that said, that's all I have for today, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you. And I just do want to say that you were wondering if maybe you should or maybe you shouldn't report. And I just want to say that that's great information. It's a great update. I always appreciate hearing how these programs are doing, especially when we're just trying something out. And just the thoughtfulness with how this has been executed is fantastic. So I'm glad that you stuck around for this whole meeting to make that presentation and put forth all that effort. I really do appreciate it. I see Ms. Naker has a hand up.
Yeah, just wanted to say, Munir, your presentations are always just spellbinding. You do the work. Your staff is incredible. And I think it's really helpful to see sort of the numbers that have to be reached out to in order to get the numbers secured for the program. I think that's one slide, but behind that slide lies so many hours and sweat, equity, and work that goes into it. And just want to thank you for that and for the cogent way that you always summarize all of this complicated information. And I loved the heat map of College Bound St. Paul. That was a great sneak in. At some point, it would be really great to all the babies to just hear how the program is going to be evaluated. I know that that's a huge piece of this. The whole point is to show results, and I'm really interested in what the results are that we are going to be looking for that are going to show evidence of success. So for a later time, but just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Naker. Ms. Prince. Ms. Prince, I believe you're on mute.
I also want to thank Mr. Carter-Ramos for a great report. And also, I'm gonna quote our former governor, Arnie Carlson, who was on the radio the other day, and I hope I'm doing it accurately, but it goes to what the mayor and the Office of Financial Empowerment were created to do. He is a former Republican, although he was a very centrist, even sometimes progressive Republican governor. And he said that it is time for this country to restructure our economy as a trickle-up economy, to fund people at the lower end so that they can rise out of poverty and become successful, which will, of course, then stimulate the whole economy for everyone. And I thought it was a fascinating observation from him and a piece of advice. And as part of that, he was talking about the guaranteed income effort. So I just want to say how much it means to me that we're ahead of the curve on this issue as well. So again, thank you, Mr. Carter-Ramos. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. I see Ms. Yang.
Thanks, Council President. Munir, I really enjoyed the presentation, and I really liked us being able to just see who's benefiting from the pilot program. And I think just seeing the map of that was just really reaffirming of the areas that we know already are experiencing like heavy poverty, and to know that the folks who are getting these payments are the ones who are living in those neighborhoods was just really, really great. And so I want to say thanks for sharing that info out to us. I'm really curious on when we'd be able to hear from families who are getting the payments. Those personal testimonies are so important. I'd love to hear that at some point. Maybe like when we get closer to the end of it, or maybe, in the next few months to come. Do you have any thoughts around that?
We're thinking through that, and thinking about both of just in terms of College Bound, which is a pool, was selected from. And I think that our way we intended to engage, through the Office of Financial Empowerment with all these families has obviously changed, because of COVID. So I think, we're identifying pathways, to connect and, do the storytelling work, behind this, because it's not just about how people benefit from it. It's also around what are the stories of the impact it had in their lives, and how, as they tell those stories, what types of things do we learn about the issues that are impacting St. Paul residents. So we're definitely looking forward to that. I don't have a concrete timeline on any of that, but we're it's front of mind, and obviously COVID has changed the way in which we engage.
All right, we'll look forward to that in the future, though. I think that's a good ask, especially, people voluntarily wanting to share. I see Mr. Tao has a hand up.
Thank you, Council President. Monia, thank you for the presentation. As you were presenting, one of the things that came across my mind was that, the city of St. Paul, we give TIF, tax increment and financing, to big developers and folks that want to come in here, and they get their subsidy, they get their handout. And here we are, we're trying to do something good for our neighbors and folks that are among us that have the least. And so I think it's a shift, right? It's a paradigm shift, and how we're always trying to do, how we have these tools like TIF to help big organization, big developer develop. But this is a tool that you presented before us to help our neighbors and folks who among us that have the least, so that they can have an opportunity. And so that just came to my mind, and as you're speaking. And so I hope that we'll continue to grow this program, and that there's already been success. I think that if I was this family and I was getting $500 a month to put food on the table, that gives me tremendous hope. It releases some stress. And we just saw recently how a mother, they had kill or murder their child, and they put it on the system. And so, I don't know why a parent would do that to their kids, but I think I think other reasons about a stressor can cause human to do things that's unbelievable. And so I think that this program is really important. I hope we'll continue to find support and work for it.
Thank you, Mr. Tao. Are there, Ms. Yang, is your hand up again or just still up? Okay, just checking. All right, well, we have a resolution in front of us, resolution public hearing, and we have had this online and over the phone. And so I would just take a motion from Ms. Yang to close the public hearing and approve. Is there discussion on that motion? All right, seeing none, roll call.
Jalali.
Aye.
Naker.
Aye.
Prince.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Tolbert.
Yes.
Yang.
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. The legislative hearing officer recommends adoption of the following resolutions, as no objections to these recommendations were received. Item 25, RLH TA 20-573, 872 Duluth Street. Item 26, RLH TA 20-158, 365 Edmond Avenue. Item 29, RLH TA 20-676, 1248 Farrington Street. Item 30, RLH TA 20-544, 142 5th Street East. Item 32, RLH SAO 21-2, 98 Garfield Street. Item 34, RLH RR 20-52, 1013 Jameson Street. Item 35, RLH TA 20-609, 160 Larpenteur Avenue West. Item 36, RLH SAO 20-50, 1098 Marion Street. Item 37, RLH OA 20-11, 1801 Nebraska Avenue East. Item 38, RLH TA 20-703, 444 Page Street East. Item 39, RLH TA 20-641, 1202 Payne Avenue. Item 40, RLH TA 20-617, 850 Randolph Avenue. Item 41, RLH BBR 20-81, 1065 Ross Avenue. Item 43, RLH TA 20-608, 1128 7th Street West. Item 45, RLH TA 20-572, 818 Sherburne Avenue. Item 48, RLH TA 20-577, 1825 University Avenue West. Item 50, RLH TA 20-628, 1627 White Bear Avenue North. Item 52, RLH AR 20-50, and this removal dangerous trees. Item 53, RLH AR 20-51. And this one has an address of 1306 Fairmount Avenue. Item 54, RLH AR 20-133, collection of vacant building registration fees. Item 55, RLH AR 20-134, securing and/or emergency boarding services. Item 56, RLH AR 20-135, demolition services. Item 58, RLH AR 20-137, excessive use of inspection or abatement services. Item 60, RLH AR 20-145, securing and/or emergency boarding services. And item 61, RLH AR 21-7, securing and/or emergency boarding services. And the motion is to adopt these items.
So moved by Ms. Naker. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Jalali?
Aye.
Naker?
Aye.
Prince?
Aye.
Tao?
Aye.
Tolbert?
Yes.
Yang?
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen?
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the resolutions are adopted. For the following items, no objection to the legislative hearing officer's amended recommendation was received, and therefore she recommends amendment and adoption. 23, RLH TA 20-157, 793 Arlington Avenue West. Item 24, RLH BBR 20-77, 1544 Beach Street. Item 28, RLH SAO 20-24, 2233 Energy Park Drive. Item 44, RLH RR 21-1, 1179 7th Street East. Item 46, RLH TA 20-340, 158 Sydney Street East. Item 57, RLH AR 20-136, ratifying assessments for collection of fire certificate of occupancy fees. And item 59, RLH AR 20-138, graffiti removal services. And again, the motion is to amend and adopt these items.
So moved by Ms. Jalali. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Jalali?
Aye.
Naker?
Aye.
Prince?
Aye.
Tao?
Aye.
Tolbert?
Yes.
Yang?
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen?
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the resolutions are adopted as amended. For the following items, the legislative hearing officer recommendation is to continue the public hearings to the dates that I will note. Item 47, RLH TA 20-707, 716 Sims Avenue, January 27th. Item 49, RLH TA 20-596, 1935 University Avenue West, February 17th. And item 51, RLH RR 20-32, 901 York Avenue, January 20th. And again, the motion is to continue the public hearings to those dates.
So moved by Ms. Yang. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Jalali?
Aye.
Naker?
Aye.
Prince?
Aye.
Tao?
Aye.
Tolbert?
Yes.
Yang?
Aye.
Council President Brandmoen?
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are continued to those pertinent dates. For the following items, the legislative hearing officer's recommendation is to refer the items to the legislative hearing on the dates that I will note. Item 27, RLH RR 20-44, 854 Edmond Avenue, January 26. Item 31, RLH RR 20-31, 1033 Gaultier Street, February 9th. Item 33, RLH RR 20-51, 1629 Hartford Avenue. Item 42, RLH, oh, I'm sorry, that date was January 26. Item 42, RLH RR 20-59, 1313 Seminary Avenue, February 9th. And again, the motion is to refer those items to the legislative hearings for the dates that I noted.
All right, so moved by Mr. Tao. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Jalali?
Aye.
Baker?
Aye.
Prince?
Aye.
Tao?
Hello.
Councilmember Tao, are you voting?
Aye. Sorry.
Tolbert?
Yes.
Yang?
Aye.
Council President Brandmoen?
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolutions are referred to legislative hearings for those pertinent dates.
And that brings us to the end of our agenda. That's fantastic. Thank you, Marcia, for your fantastic work with your team on that as well. Is there news from the wards before we adjourn? It doesn't appear to be. Oh, Ms. Prince, yes, Ms. Prince.
I just wanted to say on Monday, Martin Luther King Day, there are a couple of different events. Interfaith Action is coordinating the annual Martin Luther King breakfast. And of course, it's virtual this year. So just go to their website and you can click on the link, and the breakfast itself starts at 9 o'clock. The login time is around 8:30. The speakers are Ambassador Andrew Young, the former mayor of Atlanta, and Dr. Bernice King, who is the chief executive officer of the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change. And then in the evening, the Eastside Freedom Library is hosting a discussion at 7 o'clock entitled The Freedom Struggle is a Labor Struggle. And if you go to the Eastside Freedom Library and sign up for it, then you'll also get a link to the movie At the River I Stand, which tells the story of the 1968 Memphis sanitation workers strike. So sign up, watch the movie, and then participate in the discussion between 7 and 8 o'clock on Monday night. And that is it.
Thanks for that update too. There's usually so much large group activities on the MLK Day, and it's wonderful that folks have found ways to continue to celebrate and honor that. And just before we go, you all know this, but what a day we have had. You know, we approved our QAP 9% credit. We talked about other projects that are moving forward for housing, and with our update on the encampments, we talked about the importance of housing, and I feel proud that we're moving ahead on creating the ultimate resource, and that is housing that people can afford and live in. We talked about reparations. We talked about our pilot program. I mean, there's just so much that moves forward, and sometimes in our the challenging times we're living in, you can feel sort of despairing and concerned. And I just want to point to all the incredible positive things that happened here in the last few hours and just say that it's a privilege and honor to work with you folks. So thank you very much. With that, we'll be adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.